Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel Iterade, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy. Okay, welcome back, Lights Out Podcast fans. Great people, smart ones. Another special guest today. Super excited about this one for several reasons. One of them is this is one of the old school guys, older than me. This is one of the guys who I first found when I first started fighting. And, you know, I remember it's like, dude, I'm from Indiana. This is the first guy from Indiana on TV, on pay-per-view. So got to train with him, looked up to him as a fighter. It was awesome. Been around forever. Gary Myers, how you doing, brother?
I'm great. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, dude, good to have you, man. Like I said, when I first started fighting, big name. Oh, I've been following you, brother. You know that. I always see you doing stuff. Wrestling coach now. How long you been doing that?
This will be my 10th year, and last year we went undefeated, and we just qualified. This school, in the first 50 years of this school, they've never qualified for team state, and we just now qualified for the 2A team state, which I'm excited about.
Nice, nice. Congrats.
We have put in a tremendous amount of work. Man, I bet I got my kids 40 extra dual meets when the season ended.
Wow.
Gary, is there anything more gratifying than helping children, especially at the high school level? Isn't it awesome?
Man, I'll tell you, it's the greatest thing to watch them grow. You know, we always, you know, I come from a school that was always ranked number 2 or 1 in the state. For the whole 15 years I was there, Monte Southside won a state a few times, lost it, was runner-up. They lost to Delta, who's 5-time state champs. And it's great being on that state level of Indiana because we don't have class systems. It's just one class. Everybody wrestles each other. And just like Chris Lytle, I believe his team was runner-up and he was a runner-up in the state, which a lot of people don't know about Chris. Correct? Am I wrong?
100% correct there.
Yeah. And so Chris went to Southport High School, and I've been going there since 1974 watching the state championships. So I have a love for that school. And that's exactly how I met Chris in the wrestling room, him and Alex Stibling in that wrestling room. And I rolled with him and Alex, and I said to myself, and I probably said it out loud, I go, oh, you're going to be good. And this is, I'm not sure what year it is, in the 90s, but I just.
98, probably 1998.
Yeah, and Alex Stibling was great on his feet, and I always prided myself on my feet. I've wrestled, trained with Chris a few times, and him and the guy Klingerman James Klingerman down in
James Klingerman.
The only 2 guys I've ever rolled with in my life that I was constantly. I would be on top in the guard, and I am constantly trying to figure out
question
submitted, and I'm in charge. I'm on top, and I'm just like, holy crap! And they're like Chris had this crazy. I don't know what you call a butterfly guard. Chris, you can probably explain that.
Yeah,
but I could not pass that. And Klingerman, just every move I made, it was like going into the anaconda. I could not, and it was a weird thing because I usually am pretty dominant on top. But anyway, Southport High School is where I first met Chris, and where we used to go to all the state championships. And Indiana, like I said, is one class state to win a state title. There's only 4 in America, and it's tough. So we always say, oh, we got to get you to state. We got to get you to state. I'm from a small school, 600 kids. And but the thing is, I watch these kids develop from their freshman year until I leave them their senior year. And what a blessing it is to watch them mature. Get really good. Senior year, be 40-2 or something. You know, when they started out, couldn't win a match.
Yeah.
And and my son now is the assistant coach with me, and I watched him struggle through the years. I was hard on my son, and he quit and went to basketball his 6th, 7th, and 8th grade year. Thank God his freshman year came back to me and said, hey, I think it's time I start wrestling again. So he was going to Fisher's High School over here. He was there about 2 months, and I said, dude, and they were just dogging him out in practice. I mean, just things that you wouldn't do to a wrestler. So I took him out of there, called Mr. Falkins to IHSAA, and said, I need eligibility for my son. I go, you know, my son had cancer, had testicular cancer, and lost one of his testicles. And
Jesus.
he had some anxiety issues, and Fish is about, I don't know, 3,500, 5,000 kids. I don't know. And it's about a mile from here. So I took him out there immediately that day and got him enrolled at Hamilton Heights. And Colton, he had trouble. So he threw out his shoulder, tore 4 labrums his junior year. Had he not done that, he'd have been on the podium his senior year. I had to wait a whole year. His junior year, he blew out his shoulder in the 3rd day of practice, and I had to wait till January. I was in November. I had to wait till January, and I kept telling him he was faking. I go, there's nothing wrong with your shoulder. I go, if you don't want to wrestle, don't wrestle. He's like, no, Dad, there's something wrong with my shoulder. So I took him to the doctor and said, you realize he has 3 labrum tears and a dislocated shoulder. And he had been in my practice doing what he could, like stand-ups, this, that, and the other, for 3 months with a dislocated shoulder. I didn't know it. Didn't look like nothing to me. So we took him right into surgery and got it. And I babied him for up until about November. We got him in practice. And then when I took him to a Purdue, Iowa match at Purdue, like January the 5th, 2 years ago, he watched that match and watched how Iowa mentally prepared for the matches and what they did when they walked off the match changed his life. This guy, I had him wrestle 20 pounds heavier than he was his freshman, sophomore year, set out his junior year, but he starts winning. I mean, like, you wouldn't believe it. I had him at 182, and I blew him up past about 10 pounds. He had to cut 10 pounds every time to wrestle, but Colton became a great wrestler for Hamilton Heights. But I'm just telling you, the bottom line, there's no more joy than to watch these kids get better over the 4 years. And I work tirelessly year round to make sure that happens.
It's good. Well, let's talk about how we know you.
Okay.
So your first fight, what I saw, that I could find, I don't know if you had any previous to that, was November 18th, 1995 for John Perretti's show, Extreme Fighting. I think it was in North Carolina. And you had fought in a tournament. And do you recall, was that your first actual fight?
No. So I started fighting. So my coach, Dan Payne, put in UFC 1. We were doing a night training session, and I was out in Arizona. I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, where I was an All-American, and he put in a tape of Hoist Gracie. He goes, you think you can do this? I said, I can do that. This is easy. You got to remember, I grew up next to the projects in Muncie, Indiana, and I fought every day of my life. And it wasn't something I sought out. It's just the way it was in my neighborhood. We always were fighting. And so it was a natural progression for me to in the end, if you talk to any people from Muncie, they go, that's exactly where he should have been. But yeah, I started fighting in February of 94. And I fought in a bar. Like I said, I posted on your guys' site earlier that probably had 5 fights in one night, but you got to understand, these guys are not skilled fighters. They might think they're tough, but had a great double leg at the time, and if I could put you on your back, it was over.
So who was the promoter? Do you remember?
Now that I do not, to this day, don't know who the promoter was, but I do know Jazz Bowling knows the bar. Because I always call him and go, what bar was that I started fighting at? And it's he knows the name of that bar. And they used to show my fights on something called Cheese TV here in Indiana. And they used to replay all my fights on this obscure cable company. And so I had been fighting, and then Dan Payne goes, I know Dan Severn, but I know his brother better. So he called his brother out in Arizona, and 2 weeks later, I'm on pay-per-view. And I don't know any jiu-jitsu. I don't know how to box. I'm just a wrestler and a damn good street fighter, right? And I'm going to say that because I'm braggadocious. I've probably been in 700 street fights, and I ain't never lost one of them. And now I probably lose about 700 of them. But
hey, real quick, Gary, can you give us a little bit of your background? I mean, you were like Olympic caliber wrestler, Greco. So, I mean, you passed all that. How did you get your progression to fighting? Obviously, street fight, but then what was your wrestling background and that got you into the position?
Well, so I was recruited to LSU, who was ranked 4th in the country at the time. And I even think Kevin Jackson was on that team, the Olympic gold medalist. And they dropped their program 2 weeks after I was scheduled to, to arrive on campus.
Oh.
I think that was 1983. So
Title IX.
Yes.
Title IX.
I mean, they had Kevin Jackson on their team who would be an Olympian after that. They had other great stars too.
Yeah.
So anyways, I got in the Army, started wrestling for Fort Hood, and wrestled for the All-Army out in the Nationals in Mexico and stuff, and got really good at Greco, because in the Army, you can't wrestle freestyle, you got to wrestle Greco back at that time. And I traveled a lot all over the world. And when I got out, I went to Ball State for 4 years, but I kept wrestling. Like me and my buddy Brian Thomas, I don't know why, he's a couple years older than me. We just kept traveling and wrestling tournaments and nationals. And like in 1987, I had the worst draw at the Greco Nationals of anybody in the history. I pulled John Morgan, our Olympian, lost 15-14 to him. And then I pulled Randy Couture the very next match. And I thought, holy crap. I just flew out to New York to go 2 and barbecue. But it was the worst draw ever. So anyways, I was sitting in a cafe in Muncie, and Mr. Ellis, an old high school, his team won the state for Shortridge. He coached him the state championship in 65. He came to Muncie Southside. They tried to say he was crazy, and they would never let him coach. I mean, he coached, but they would never let him be the head coach or be much involved. The time I got around my freshman years and stuff, he saw me in a cafe and he says, "What are you doing here?" I go, "Man, I'm going to Ball State." He goes, "No, what are you doing in this town?" And I go, it changed my life. A couple things changed my life. Getting into college, an old girlfriend got me into college, but he says, "You'll be at my house in an hour. I'm gonna get you a full ride scholarship." I'm 29 years old. And I'm like, man, I got some unfinished business. Absolutely. So I went to his house on the phone with Butte, Montana, Doc Belshar, who's like 92 years old and is still a college coach. And he said, "I'm gonna give you a scholarship." Well, he called me every night at work. I don't know why. And then they dropped the program. So he immediately called Dan Payne at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And trust me, I had no business going to a high academia school like that. But I did survive because I stayed up to 4 a.m. every night and studied. But I got there, became their second All-American in school history. And that's where this whole transition into fighting, because my coach goes, "Well, you get a lot of fights." He goes, "How would you," he put a tape hoist race, UFC, "how would you like to fight on pay-per-view?" I go, "Dude, I'd love that." I go, this looks great. I mean, because at the time I'm watching UFC 1, I'm thinking, all I have to do is double leg. I mean, I don't see much skill here. Like, everybody had their own skill set, right? I don't want to stand with a guy like Pat Smith, right? But I can get people to the ground. I think I can be successful at this. So while he's trying to set that up, I went and started fighting in nightclubs and stuff. And I fought a bunch. I mean, there was this place in Indianapolis, and I'd have to ask Chaz Bowling the name of it again, because I can never remember that place. It was a half strip joint, and another half they had a ring set up in there. And in my first fight, I fought a guy, Chris, you probably know, but like I said, I can't remember his damn name, but he was a professional boxer in Indiana. He had a well-known name, and I put him on his back too. There was no rules. I remember sticking my thumb deep in his eye, trying to rip it out.
Ugh.
I said, "No rules," right? And no rules. All right. So I stuck my thumb deep in his eye and tried to pull it out. And the whole crowd came in the ring after me. The state police had to escort me out, but that was my first experience. That was the ending fight. That's like my 5th fight of that night. That was my ending experience that night. I'm kind of half lit. I've been drinking. I was paid $200. My bar tab was $400 because I brought some people with me. So I lost $200 that night. So that's probably the cheapest I've ever fought for.
You know what though? You got your hand raised.
Yeah. But listen, they go.
Is there anything more important than that? Never mind the money.
No, there never is. And that'll lead us to Yuki Kondo in Japan.
So let me jump in with a quick question here, because now you're in Indiana, you're getting the fights in, in the neighborhood, in the bars and stuff like that. You got a friend, you see UFC, you got an idea of the skill and stuff. Now, but the first official fight is on John Perretti. Now, John was a big fan of another Indiana person, Phyllis Lee. Talk about Phyllis Lee. How'd you meet them? Where was she involved? Where did she become involved in your career?
Okay, so Phyllis Lee, this is how we did this whole thing with calling Dan Severn's brother. his brother called Dan. Dan said, look, my manager's Phyllis Lee. Here's her number to my college wrestling coach. I meet her up in northern Indiana, and she goes, can you kill someone? I mean, I'm looking at me and my wife now are looking across the table from her. She goes, can you kill someone? I go, absolutely. And her friend was named Judy, and I can't remember her last name, but she was on the way home. She had told her, she was, I think he really can. But anyway, that's how I started. I was on pay-per-view like in a couple of weeks after that.
All right.
Wow.
So that's how we know you. So let me kind of frame this for the people at home. So John Perretti was a brilliant matchmaker at this time. He later became a UFC matchmaker. And he comes up with Extreme Fighting. And it's the first Extreme Fighting, which was an incredible, I think he only did 2 or 3 of them. And it was just an incredible like series of events. So he had an incredible knack for picking talent, like people that would like bloom into just great fighters, but he would get them like in their first couple. Like he had a real good idea of who to put in tournaments and how to match them. And your first fight was Mike Glanville, who at the time was 6-0 in mixed martial arts. And he was listed as a high-end he was listed as a kickboxing world champion, but I couldn't find anything of any world titles. I think it was kind of inflated.
Yeah. You said Tommy Glanville, right?
Mike.
My
Glanville.
first fight, Battlecade, was Tommy Glanville.
Yeah, it's Tom.
Is it Tom? I don't know why I got
Yeah, he's
Mike
dead now.
Okay.
Oh,
He fought Bob Sapp, and I from what I
Bob
understand,
killed him?
huh?
Bob killed him? You said he's dead.
He fought Bob Sapp when he died that night in his hotel room.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, a drug, yeah, ketamine or something. He overdosed on that.
Dang. I was just kidding.
So Tommy Glanville was my first fight. You know, I'm little. I weighed in at that thing 214 pounds. I didn't weigh 228, nothing like it. I weighed 214 with all my clothes on. And I remember at weigh-ins, my buddy who was going to be here today, Ron Johnson, he goes, looks at me, he goes, you know how to fight? Talking to Tommy Glanville, he goes, yeah. He goes, well, you better know how to fight. So I just knew I had to get him to the ground. And I knew things would end right there. I really didn't know what I was doing because when usually I would punch, but I just grabbed the cage and started headbutting because I'd done that in the street so many times. I knew it was very effective. Hey, well, everybody says Coleman's the king, the godfather of ground and pound. Try to find me something that anybody's been headbutted into submission before me or after me.
You were the king of the headbutt for sure.
Right. He didn't come on board till 96 or so. I'm like, I've been doing this since 94.
So
and
Chris,
documented on TV in 95.
So they list Tom Glanville as a kickboxing world champion, and they've got Gary as 150 and 1 in MMA.
Came from. So you're the first people I ever talked to about this. You know, people usually when they watch one fight on YouTube, they don't question it, right? I don't even know to this day that they were saying that on TV or anything. I don't even know where this comes from.
Yeah, no, they were inflating it. They were absolutely, but that's why we're talking about it, because that was kind of the time. Like they've got to sell their product to an audience. And I have no doubt that the people Tom Glanville was a kickboxing world champion where neither of you two, I mean, everybody was misrepresented across the entire event, including Conan Silveira, where Chris and I, when we interviewed Conan, we're like, all right, they said you won this tournament. What is it? And he's like, I don't know. It's really not a big deal. And we're like, oh, okay. But everybody in that tournament was really like the volume was turned up. So we enjoy kind of addressing it with the participants. Yeah.
So Tommy Glanville, I was in a bus with him to go get and I will tell you this.
He was tough.
But not about him, but Perretti, I had to do a CAT scan and everything to get on that TV show. So he did a complete physical with us, even to give us CAT scans and to figure out if we had any head traumas or anything. And that had to have been expensive for Penthouse Magazine, who owned that company. But I was on the bus with Tommy Glanville, a little white van, and I heard him in the back. He didn't know me. He goes, man, they said I was a world champ. He goes, I'm no world champ. He admitted it himself to me, not to me, but him. I heard him talking in the back of the van. So they did throw a lot of stuff on there, like Mario Sperry, 274-0. I don't even know where that comes from.
Where Chris, where they mentioned that Gary was like a 6-time like Greco world champion, but I believed all of it based on his entrance, where him and his entire gym had American flag pants on and run into the cage. Right there, no matter what was said about you, Gary, I was eating it up.
Yeah, you got to understand. Unlike people now, I love this country, and I'm a veteran.
You still wear those pants, Gary?
Listen, those pants are for guys that weigh 214. I'm 275 now. But I bought all that stuff for my crew before we got on the plane. I bought all their plane tickets. I bought all the clothes. I just, I was more, I'm going to show out. If I'm going to get on television, you're going to remember me.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
And sometimes you only get one shot at it. Here's what I love about Chris Lytle. This guy, I've taken pictures of Chris when he's bleeding all over the place and said, hey, so you want to be a fighter? You remember that, Chris? And I had to sign him at the casino.
Yeah.
There's nothing more enjoying to watch than people. They want skill. Chris is a very skilled fighter, but these guys that can withstand the punishment, just like Nate the other day. Listen, most guys would have checked out, right? Yeah. You see a little blood, you're checking out. But this is guys that can get in there and bleed all over the place and just wiping it from their face. Man, that's the old school love of fighting. Just fighting through all the obstacles. You know what I mean?
Gary, what I always say about it is this. I say this guy is a good hammer, but he's not a good nail. Now, that's my way of saying. I mean, some of those guys are front runners and they can dish it out, but they don't. If they get hit and they bleed, they're done. You to be a great fighter, I think you have to be both. You know what I mean? You got to be able to take it and still come back. Like I said, Nate, those guys, Cowboy, just the true fighters are the guys I love watching. People who come to fight. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
Listen, so that puts asses in the seats. That puts pay-per-view buys up there. Anytime Nate fights again, I guarantee you he's the main event. I don't care if you put him first on the card.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Gary, your second fight is actually I'm gonna hold my beliefs on it. I'll comment afterward. But it was actually against American top team head coach Conan Silveira, and he was listed as 27-0.
Right.
And why don't you walk us through that fight and tell us what happened? And we'll address
Hold on, real quick. Can you tell us how had the last fight ended? I mean, you didn't talk about that.
Glanville, have you not seen that?
No.
Fight? You've never seen me fight Tommy Glanville.
I've seen the Conan fight.
Well,
headbutts, baby.
Tommy Glanville in the submission in about 4 minutes.
The dude, he had blood.
I broke his orbital socket, and
it was brutal.
Okay,
like legit brutal. And the thing where I think the in-ring IQ of Gary was much higher than the average person at that time, because he would not use the fence a lot. But whenever he was about to get tilted, he would just kind of grab it and reposition, which was absolutely legal at that time.
Yeah.
And once Gary had you against the fence and on your back, you were toast.
It's a wrap.
You weren't getting up from it. Like it was, he had his hips down. You were pinned in there, and it was just a matter of time before he started working headbutts and elbows. And that's what happened at Glanville. Glanville had he had to be carried from the ring. Like it was ugly.
Yeah,
so
put him on a stretcher.
So let's talk about your second fight. You fight a 27-0 Conan Silveira, and this is like we had said, a 4-man tournament, and this is the finals actually. American top team head coach Conan Silveira. Why don't you walk us through that fight and kind of let us know what from your eyes what took place?
I will tell you real quickly about fighting Tommy Glanville. My contract called for zero money unless I want to fight. So you want to talk about going, hey, I've spent all this money to get here, this, that, and the other. I got to win this fight. And so after winning that fight, I made $3,000. Now I'm going to go fight Conan. If I beat him, I win another $11,000. I don't know where this number comes from because I don't negotiate it, right? And I'm telling you, at that point, I feared nobody anywhere. I just didn't fear anybody. My adrenaline was through the roof. If you can't tell in my eyes, I fear nothing. That's just how I grew up. My father was a drill sergeant for 32 years, and I I'd had a rough upbringing and not much scared me, not much at all. And so I go to fight Conan. Both these guys are big dudes. I'm telling you, I weigh 214. They're both 250, 6'2". It never bothered me. That kind of stuff never bothered me. I knew if I could get you on the ground, it was over. I just knew it. That's just how my life was. And every time I got somebody on the ground, a big relief would come over me like, oh, it's over. I'm winning this fight.
I can see that.
So I get Conan, and I'm doing, listen, and I practiced this before I got there. I knew that I would have to be on my feet. And I knew I was not, I'd never trained in boxing, never trained jiu-jitsu. So I was just going to rely on wrestling because I had never trained that stuff. And it took me 2 years after losing those fights or losing that fight to him and getting armbarred by Jeremy Horn that I would even consider training jiu-jitsu. I just didn't believe in it. And but after the Jeremy Horn fight, I was like, all right, you can't go down this road and not train jiu-jitsu. I just didn't want to do it.
All right, so let's talk about Conan. Let's talk. Because it's an interesting.
I'm pounding him, whatever. At the rules meeting, they said if we stop the fight, it's over. If you're bleeding, it's over. So what happens? My first opportunity, I got him on his back. He tries to turn me. I hit the cage real quick, but I cut him. I cut his eye open. They stopped the fight. If you listen, God's my witness. Go back through the tape when
you were celebrating.
Igor Gokar comes over to me. He goes, all right, we're going to restart the fight. I go, no, that's not the rules. I mean, once you stop it because the guy's bleeding, these are Battlecade rules. I paid attention in a rules meeting. Yeah, fight's over. So when he said, I got him, there's no way he's not getting up. And so when we went back to the corner, Igor or Gokar or whatever, Gokar says, we're going to start the fight over. I protested. And then my corner guy said, go, Gary, we got to go. I'm like, all right, but I wanted you to know that we were kicked out of New York in the middle of the night. All my partners had to take a bus to Wilmington, North Carolina. The governor kicked us out. Cuomo, I think it was, or somebody.
Prick.
Sorry. Yeah, and so we were going to fight at an armory there in New York, and they just kept harassing Battlecade till we had to leave. So I flew out.
Wait. This was not Battlecade. This was Extreme Fighting.
This is Battlecade Extreme Fighting.
Okay, I don't see any Battlecade listed anywhere, but I do recall that. So go ahead.
It's just called Battlecade Extreme Fighting.
Okay.
So they kicked us out of New York in the middle of the night, like midnight. Now everybody's under the same duress and all this. I'm not experienced on what's going on. So they stick my crew in a bus, driving down to Wilmington, North Carolina. They got there just before I fought, and then I was flown there. But when they broke us up and put me against the cage again, I was exhausted. I mean, I was tired. All that adrenaline traveling, and then everybody had to endure the same things I did. I always tell my wrestlers, I don't care what duress you're under. The same wrestler over there is under the same duress you're under.
But Gary, on a different note here, when they break you up the first time, you think you won. That's I mean, your adrenaline jump is happening. That's real.
Well, I mean, Gary, let's put additional context to this. Gary is in top position. Delivered a couple of headbutts.
Yeah.
Conan's got a real heavy cut on his right eye.
Right.
They stop it for a doctor to check it.
Yeah. And then you stand it back up? No.
And they stand it back up again. So that all that hard work that Gary had put in order to get that takedown was just kind of wiped clean. Yes.
Yes. And remind me to say something about the doctor in a second. When he restarted the fight, I was tired. Dude, I had just an adrenaline dump, everything. I thought I'd already won the world title.
Yeah.
And so when I went to shooting again, I'm tired, right? He gets me under the chin, chokes me out. You got to understand, I don't know jiu-jitsu. I don't know anything about chokes. I didn't know how to get out of it. I was like, where do I go from here? So I tap out. But I want you guys to notice, if you go rewatch that tape, the doctor who had, this whole thing was, I'm going to go somewhere with this. The doctor that stopped the fight and in Gokar, the doctor comes running up to the ring, smiling and everything when Conan beat me. I want you to watch that again. When Conan chokes me out, I tap. That doctor comes running up to the ring. He's smiling, laughing because these guys are in cahoots. So here's where we end up. I asked John Perretti point blank, what would have happened if I'd have won that fight? He said, you'd have set back jiu-jitsu 75 years. That's the exact quote to me. And I said, and I was in the dressing room, and I asked him, I said, "Are you bringing me back?" He goes, "Yes, you fought great. I'll bring you back." Phyllis had to beg him to bring me back on the last show, the Extreme Challenge 4 in Iowa. And I got into it. I don't think Perretti liked me too well, because here's what happened before the fight. I wanted to wear my shoes. He didn't want me to. I said, "I'm not going out. I missed 5 minutes before we're getting ready to fight." He goes, "Take those shoes off." I said, "I ain't doing it. I've never fought without my shoes on." About my wrestling, she's like, "I'm not going to kick." He goes, "Take them off." Like, "It ain't happening." I go, "I'm not going out there without my shoes on. This is for the very first fight." So he goes around and asks all the fighters, "Do you want to wear shoes?" And almost every one of them said yes. Almost everyone said they wanted to wear their shoes. And I got to go on out there, but I pissed Perretti off at that point. I don't think we were ever, really got back on equal terms after me taking a stand. But I didn't know anything. Like, I've always been in my wrestling shoes, and I knew what my toes to get broke. I didn't know. But him saying that, if you watch Battlecade Street Fighting again, watch a couple things. Watch him stop my fight. Watch me tell Go-Kart it's over. I go, "No, I'm not starting again." And then I had no choice. You're on TV, there's a lot of pressure, right? You just don't say you're not fighting anymore. There's a lot of pressure to keep moving on. But I protested. You can watch it. And then when I lost, something very telling to me was when the doctor came running up to the ring smiling and laughing. And I thought, you guys,
Gotcha.
you certainly changed the outcome of this fight.
Well, let's look at the rest of the card. You've got John Lewis and Carlson Gracie Jr. that fought to a draw, or either Lewis won, or I think it was actually a draw. And then you got Igor Zinoviev in the main event, Jeffrey Epstein bodyguard, I might add, versus Mario Sperry, and Epstein's bodyguard won. And I think John Lewis fought to a draw. So jiu-jitsu really could have taken a hit that one event. And Health Gracie was on the card. I think it was like a 15-second knockout or something like that on his end. But the Brazilians really could have, gotten a black eye had you won that.
I mean, they brought out a couple tomato cans too. And I've never met Perretti. He tells everybody that he's rolled with every guy there. He never rolled with me. I never met him until that day. But they brought some tomato cans out. Health Gracie fought a guy that had no business in the cage.
What gave you that impression?
The guy that he fought, he was like a boxer or something. No, this is the guy that said, I have one move, and it's to kill, and it's some pressure move. I was like, okay, to this day, I just can't get on board with the pressure kill. Where you put your finger on somebody.
Hey, if you would have landed it though,
he hypnotizes you. Yeah.
So, but he was not good, and then they put Conan against a guy that weighed like 190 at best, maybe 180. Arcanium or something.
Easy round.
Probably good for his weight class, but not good for Conan.
Yeah.
Okay, so we started this talking about this event where you had mentioned Phyllis Lee as your manager.
Yeah.
And that had you not won, you wouldn't have gotten paid.
Right.
Correct?
Come on, Phyllis. That's terrible.
Right.
Did you actually see the contract?
Yes.
You did. Okay. Because we've heard.
But that doesn't mean that contract couldn't have been sent to me already altered.
Which is where I'm thinking probably. I mean, Phyllis Lee was your manager as well. She was very slick. Certainly somebody that if she saw an opening to go through, she would absolutely, step through it.
I don't say anything, but $11,000.
Probably 15.
Sounds like there's a few thousand missing there at the end.
Doesn't that seem like an odd number?
And like the 3,000
heard
was
it.
probably 5, and it was probably
let me ask you a quick question about Perretti and this show, because you said you were into the UFC. You sound like, with street fighting and stuff, the more rugged, the better. How was that show in terms of that was the first time there were rounds. That was the first time there were gloves. There was a lot of things going on there. Do you remember any problems with any of that, or besides the shoes and things like that?
Are you talking about me?
Yeah.
Did you just mention the UFC?
I'm sorry.
The first Battlecade.
Oh,
Yeah, in the first battle.
There was 15-minute rounds.
Oh,
and you just fought to a draw if it was over. Remember?
it was one round, and if it was
a
draw, you'd go 5 extra minutes.
Yeah. And that's what they did to them. Listen, I always thought these fights would take a minute or two. I thought, man, I can beat anybody in 2 minutes because you ever been in a street fight lasted about a minute, right? Yeah. I can beat. Listen, and throughout my career that would bring me down because I'm thinking I just need to get him down. It's over. I don't need to really be in great shape. I mean, listen, I can tell you, when I fought Carlos Bejedo for the world title in Brazil, I've been drinking for 4 months, partying, being in limos 3 nights a week with all kind of people. And I go down there, they call me with 10 days notice. Go, hey, you want to fight Carlos Bejedo for the world title? 10 days notice. I call Ryan Stout.
We're going to get to that, Gary.
Okay.
We got all that covered. So your next fight is actually on the inaugural HOOKnSHOOT.
Yeah.
The inaugural HOOKnSHOOT show.
Great organization.
Yeah, it's May 11th, 1996.
I love Jeff. Had a great time. I left there owing money too. He paid me $300, and I fought Rickson Gracie's #1 student, Nick Starks. And I body locked him, threw him to the back, headbutted him, he finally quit. And I just remember my bar tab being another 500, so I'm down to 200 again. I'm not making much money at this point, but man, I sure did love the adrenaline rush. And that was that Jeff's was bare knuckle. Actually, no time. I think the only 2 rules are no eye gouging, no biting. Gaza Calhoun, who fought like a UFC 1, was on the undercard of me. And
how did you?
I don't even know. It was the weird. And we were driving. I go, Phyllis, where are you taking me? I go, this is a little weird. I'm like, we're going out through these woods, and I don't, of course it's Indiana, but I still am thinking, what am I fighting in a parking lot or in a forest or something? What's going on? I see this barn. I'm like, I'm not fighting in there, am I? She goes, yeah. I go, Jesus Christ. So Gary, $300, I had to give Phyllis 20%, just so you know.
So and probably pay for airfare too. So there's 2 fights on the card. How did you get hooked up with this event? How did you find out about it? Was everything through Phyllis?
I was sitting, and once again, I was sitting on a bar stool. Phyllis calls me, and I'm hammered. She goes, hey, you want to fight Saturday? I go, hell, why not? Let's do it. So that's how I got hooked up. She must have known Jeff, and me and Jeff have been great friends since that very moment. Never had any problems with him. He paid the $300 like a man, and he actually put me in his Hall of Fame in 2015. But that fight was it was another one of those adrenaline rushes. I didn't know what was going to happen. Now they tell me, oh, you're fighting Rickson Gracie's #1 student. I'm like, yeah, here we go again. I know zero jiu-jitsu, but I thought, you know what? All I need to do is get him down. And I don't care how good you are with jiu-jitsu. If I start headbutting you, you're going to quit. As long as that's legal, Yeah. If we have to start going into this, as long as we have to start going into all these rules, that's what ruined me. All these friggin' rules ruined my career.
Bureaucracy is what they call it, Gary.
Yeah. And, after they had started getting every rule that they added, ruined my next fight, ruined my desire to get in great shape. And I love traveling around the world. I've been around the world 16 times for free. I mean, I've been to Russia, Japan, Brazil, Saudi Arabia. I was invited to do the first submission wrestling championships in Abu Dhabi, and I turned it down. You guys understand, while I was fighting, I was making a ton of money as a real estate agent. I mean, I worked in a model home for crossing communities, and I was making 6 figures. I mean, high 6 figures. So most of these guys did not work. And to this day, I know a lot of fighters that are broke. They have nothing.
Oh, yeah.
My father told me in 95, he goes, do me one favor, Gary. I go, what's that? He goes, do not quit your day job ever, because this stuff will be gone. Don't quit it. And that's one advice my father gave me that saved my life.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the first HOOKnSHOOT show. What was the feel like from the locker room? Well,
okay, so this barn had a stage in the back, like you'd have a high school stage. So I'm back there in this little, this room couldn't have been 5 foot by 10, and it was long.
Was it?
And it was all dirty. There was mops everywhere. It was like a janitor's closet. And that's what probably, I think it was a janitor's closet. Cause I saw this cleaning supplies and these mops everywhere. Well, I had to warm up in there. Why Hickson Gracie's student had a nice room. I mean, for the barn, it was, at least it was a clean room. When I was stuck in the
had a chair,
the laundry room. But when I went out there, the same adrenaline that I had in Battlecade, because you got to understand, later in life, when I fought on Chris Lytle, his show Banker's Life, I had lost my adrenaline by then, and I could not get fired up to fight anymore. I had to lose 60 pounds for that fight, and just didn't care anymore. But anyways, I was in that laundry room, and just hearing the stories from Gaze at Kalman, I think he was with Dan Severn, but fought at first UFC. And I just thought, I'm not as, I just kept thinking, I'm not as good as these guys. They're UFC fighters, this is Hickson Gracie's #1 student. But man, I at that time, I didn't care about nobody. But I body locked him and slammed him, and he never looked. They carted him off to the dressing room, and he never got up from that. I finally, an hour later, went back to his dressing room. It was just a room, and he was laying down, his back bleeding everywhere. And I'm like, hey man, nice fight. And I left him there. But back when I first started fighting, I left a lot of guys like that. I mean, a lot.
Well, it's always interesting to kind of go down like paths of history, especially like on first events. Like we just talked about Extreme Fighting Battlecade. Now HOOKnSHOOT. Another interesting footnote of your career is that you also fought on the first Extreme Challenge with Monte Cox. Yeah. Which is, we had talked a little about earlier where you fought Jeremy Horn.
Yeah.
So Monte actually kind of gave us a little, kind of peek into how that fight took place. Why don't you give us like your version?
Well, I went out to train at Monte's, and I was down in the basement, which is a funny story. Look, I'm still at this point, this is 96, and I still do not want to learn jiu-jitsu. I thought it was a waste of my time.
Are you uncoachable?
No, I just was a hardhead about wrestling. Okay. But
Mark Coleman admits he's uncoachable to a certain degree.
I'll never forget his interview where he says, I'm a wrestler. What do I got to know about jiu-jitsu? Well, there's a lot to know. But when you believe in your, because we started, this was about each and everybody's discipline, right? And whose discipline was the best? Well, now all these cross trainers, man, you got to be good about everything.
Yeah.
And but with Monte Cox, I wouldn't train there. I'll never forget it. So when I roll with Jason Godsey, if he got me in a hold, he'd let go. I knew I was sunk, and we didn't go through this tapping process, right? He was like, oh, and that was it. We didn't have to tap. I went out to his Monte Cox, trained with Pat Miletich, and his buddy was a cop at the time. Well, he armbarred me and about broke my arm, and I was like, oh, well, dude, what are you doing? He's like, well, we tap around here. Well, I had started learning jiu-jitsu with Godsey, where you knew you were in a rear naked or you knew you were in an armbar, you just let it go, right? No big deal. But I had never thought to tap. Like, nobody told me that's what you do in training. But that dude about broke my arm off. So I wrestled a guy from Iowa there and was putting it on him on his feet. But Pat Miletich, I'll never forget, first time I met him. He gets up on my chest, past the guard, and he goes, hey, and it gets up under my elbows with his knees. He goes, okay, go. Where do you want me to go from here? I mean, like, you're already on my chest. Like, I had no idea. Like, can you start the guard? Which I didn't know the guard anyway. So how are you going to start on my chest? So, but I don't know how the fight came about, him setting the fight. I just know that I always bring up the money because everybody thinks his fighters get rich, but he paid me $500 to show up at the VA Coliseum, and I would have got another $500 to win. And I'm beating Jeremy up pretty good on his feet, so I decide to take him down. I want to go for the headbutts, right? But man, this guy, Jeremy, stuck his head up under my arm, and I'm out over him, and he's up under my arm, and I cannot figure out how to get him back. But the next thing I know, dude, I feel this, and I don't even know how he got there. I feel this intense pain in my elbow where he popped my corpuscle. In my elbow. I had no idea he had already transitioned to an arm bar. I mean, until I felt the pain. I didn't even see him go to it. And So it was right then and there. I decided I would never fight again without not learning jiu-jitsu to do it, but stay out of everything. So my goal was to stay out of everything.
So on that first Extreme Challenge card, it's almost like a who's who of Midwest studs that made it to the UFC. You had Jason Godsey on the card, Dave Strasser, Dan Severn, Travis Fulton, Pat Miletich, Jeremy Horn, who obviously fought yourself. No. Jason Godsey actually lost to a guy named Paul Williams, who doesn't fight after that. Paul must have been an absolute savage. And Tyrone Roberts.
Fought to kind of like a draw. I think Jason kind of ended up losing, but you realize Jason immediately fought Jeremy Horn a couple months later in Michigan and beat him.
Yeah.
I was at that fight.
So that locker room, it had a lot of alphas in there, guys that just weren't used to losing.
Yeah, and my only regret, because I really didn't have. I started training with the police officers in Muncie. They didn't know jiu-jitsu either in the basement. My only regret was not hooking up with like Pat Miletich or one of those guys to actually learn how to fight. I had to piece this all together by myself, and there was times I ran into Chris or whatever, but I had started before all these guys, and I had to do this on my own. Like, I put in a couple of tapes of jiu-jitsu, I just got bored, trying to learn that stuff. I just would turn it off, so it took me a couple of years to learn it. I mean, even though you don't have to be good at jiu-jitsu, you just got to make sure you don't get armbarred or choked, or you know how to get out of that stuff, pass a guard, put a knee in. I mean, you just got to know your way around it. You don't need to be a great submission artist. You just got to make sure you don't get caught.
Yeah. So Monte said that he sent you the tape of Jeremy and Miguel. What was the quote that Monte said? Essentially, it was, he doesn't look good, but he's much better than how he looks.
Yeah, and he said you weren't all that impressed with the tape. He said you mentioned that this guy can't beat me. If he beats me, I'll quit or something like that.
I quit MMA altogether. Yeah.
Jeremy Horn?
Yeah.
I mean, listen.
He doesn't look great, but holy cow, is he amazing.
When I knew I was fighting a world kickboxing champ who in the van, he tells me he's not, and I know what particular skill I have, I didn't worry. So Jeremy Horn had a particular skill of being good at jiu-jitsu. So in his mind, he just had to withstand whatever the front part of me fighting was and put me in an armbar or whatever. So he has the luxury of knowing something I don't. And he can say, if I lose this guy, I'm fighting him. Well, that's true. If you fight a wrestler who's never trained jiu-jitsu, you can't armbar him or you can't choke him out, then you should never wrestle again. I mean, you should never fight again. But
Jeremy was amazing, though. I mean, just incredibly deceiving by how he looked and the way he fought. He led him to a world title fight with Chuck Liddell. So that was working. And like your approach in regards to, hey, if I can't beat this guy, I'm out of here. I bet you his first 50 opponents said that exact same thing. I mean, it's just he's very deceiving.
Oh, you're saying that I said if I can't beat him, I'm out of here?
That's what Monte insinuated.
Oh, never. I didn't say that.
Well, Jeremy was only 4. You remember Jeremy was only 4-1.
I thought you were saying that Monte was saying if he couldn't beat me because of his jiu-jitsu. I apologize. No, I that kind of stuff, that kind of talk doesn't come out. I am more of adrenaline junkie where I don't do much talking. I like to get out there. Why do you think I ran to the ring every time? I never wanted my concentration broke. I always sprinted to the cage because I didn't want, I've got wrestlers, if they see their girlfriend in the stand, it's a distraction, right? I wanted to get in there, put my head down, and let's fight. I never thought of people as, I can beat this guy. I never thought like that. I just knew that I had to get him to the ground. And my one thought from leaving that dressing room was to get in that cage as fast as I could and get it on. I didn't want to be distracted. And I never talked to people like that. I come from wrestling, and I never spoke about my opponents like that.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, and you got to remember, sometimes when people are offered fights, it's, I could beat them. So it's,
Okay, so I grew up in a glorious era. You didn't pick and choose your fights. You fought whoever they told you to fight.
True.
Yeah.
And that was the era I was in. Because even if I was sitting here at home and if Phyllis called me, I never had a discussion of, oh, I really don't want to fight right now. Dude, I mean, I've taken so many fights from a bar stool that I've been drinking, and they said, do you want to fight? And I hadn't, just like Brazil, I've been drinking hard for 4 months, and I took that fight. But I didn't come in the era of you could pick and choose who you fought. You fought whoever they said you were fighting. Now these guys, they can even pull out, fake an injury, whatever. I mean, just they have that luxury. When I was trying to get known and trying to fight, you fought everybody. Anybody they put in front of you had to fight.
So did Phyllis also hook you up with your bout in Pancrase in May of 1997 against Yuki Kondo?
Yeah, that was one fight I probably should have never fought. Was out of shape then too. So she flies me by myself to Kobe, Japan. So I don't even get warm up. Now you gotta understand, Pancrase. What the hell is that? I watched a couple of tapes of him. I've seen him fight Shamrock. I go, I'll be okay. I fly to Japan by myself. They pay me $1,250 and send me on a 9-hour bullet train or whatever to Kobe, fight at the Fashion Mart. And but while I'm there, is his name Jason DeLucia from UFC?
DeLucia, yeah.
Chris's
Jason
buddy.
DeLucia.
So I want to shout out to him. He's an American trader. I trained with him while I was there, and I told him during his training, I go, man, how do you get kicked in the head? I ain't never been kicked in the head. I go, how is that even possible? So I had to spend my days training with him. I didn't know he was Yuki Kondo's best friend.
Yeah.
I send this to him. So I walk into the ring. First thing that happens, you guys seen the tape? I get kicked.
Yeah, you took a strong head kick, opening exchange.
And I got up and kept fighting. But a couple other things he did, Jason DeLucia, before I walked into the cage. He's Gary, just so you know, it's disrespectful to hit somebody in the face. Even if you're on top, you cannot slap him in the face. It's disrespectful here in Japan. Don't do it. Well, I just saw later Jason Godsey beat Takahashi and Yuki Kondo with friggin' slapping the crap out of him. Remember that, Chris?
Oh, yeah.
Takahashi slapped, like he was his little kid. And, but DeLucia had been setting me up to lose this fight the whole time I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
So I get up, keep fighting. So the guy goes into a knee bar. And it's silence there. Dude, Chris, you fought there, but when I was
many
there,
times.
it's
Can't hear
silent.
Yeah.
You could hear a pin drop. It's very
eerie. Yeah.
And it was not the Pride days where you at least saw some people clapping. I mean, nobody. It was like silence. And I thought I was on Mars. The weirdest feeling going out to that fight. I was on that same fight card with Joel Sutton from UFC 1, who fought Suzuki. And who's the guy's like 7 foot tall? Schultz?
Semi Schultz.
Semi Schultz was on the card. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, I go through that fight. I'm sitting in my dressing room for 3 days straight on the edge of the bed. I haven't moved. I'm sweating. I thought I was stuck on stupid the rest of my life. I got to hotel room, and third day, Joel Sutton comes in and goes, "Hey, dude, we got to get on the plane." I go, "Man, where are we at again? What country are we in?" He goes, "Dude, we're in Japan. Come on, let me get your stuff." He got me to the airport. But I thought I was stuck that way. That was the most scary time of my life in fighting, that I had obviously a severe concussion.
Kicked in the head.
Yeah.
That was from the concussion and that opening exchange, huh?
Yeah, and I got up. You can tell I look normal. I'm watching that going.
You never really recovered from it, though.
Huh?
You never really recovered from it.
I don't. Well,
in that
3 days later, I still don't even know what country I'm in.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I sat on the bed and I hadn't moved.
Wow.
And normally I'd be out drinking, whatever, what I like to do.
Rapongi.
And
so do you think Jason DeLucia set you up?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The things that happened, the things he told me, I mean, I was training. He was the only one that had exclusive knowledge of me over there. I mean, you got to remember, this is Pancrase Alive tour, like 97. And you hadn't seen much of my fights, probably just Battlecade, right? But him kicking me in the head 5 seconds into the fight, I realized that, because I made a big deal of, how does that ever even happen? I made a big deal of that never happening to me. And the fact that I mounted, I was on top of Yuki, and they called me for trying to break his fingers. I wasn't. I just didn't know what to do because I'm not a jiu-jitsu guy. And I wanted to, you can't headbutt. I can't. And I've been warned by Delusion that that's not what you do in Japan, to slap people. Or I would have slapped the crap out of him like Jason Godsey did.
Yeah.
So Delucia, he's an interesting character. So I think he's from like Massachusetts, type area. And when you look at his record, he's a 50 Fight Club veteran, but like 95% of his fights are in Japan.
Okay, so let me tell you about him. He goes over there about once a month back then. And I watched this Ito, or I think his name, and Jason,
Ito.
Chris might have, what did you say?
Ito.
Yeah, you might have seen him. I just remember like the pancreation, they always handing him money at the airport, right? And these white, he must have made a good living off it, but he was there about once a month. It seemed like to me. I remember them paying him at the airport, and I just looked at him like, I just want to punch you in the face. But I don't know when I came around. I mean, I'd be put on a plane, and I don't remember him picking me up at the airport back here in America, but I was hurt.
Wow. So Delucia, did you have a conversation with him after this, or?
No. It's the only time I ever seen him in my life was that training with him before. Now, when you go to Japan, they put you in a room and there's nobody around, and it gets to be mind-numbing. You don't understand anything, like the language, anything. And I had to sit in that room. I don't know why they brought me so early. I was in that room, it seemed like. I got there like 9 days before this fight. I just sat in that room the whole time. And I only got to train one time. So at one time I went to train, I'm trying to pass Joel Sutton's guard. We're just working that. And I get into the ring and I'm constantly working with Jason and this, that, and the other. But they were best friends, him and Yuki Kondo. I don't know if anybody knows this. They were best friends, and he speaks Japanese.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he, I just, to this day, I think that was pretty bad. But
they loved him over there,
guy.
dude. They loved him over there, dude. They loved him over there. I remember when I went over there and I stayed and I trained for a while, and I ended up having a fight against him. And he was ranked 4th in pancreas. And I was like, all right, cool. And I was undefeated at the time. And if you watch the fight, I think I won, and I lost like a majority decision or something. I was just like, I mean, they liked him, So I mean, he kissed their ass. He played the game, and like you said, you know how the mental games there, like you're talking, not mental games. They're very smart about stuff. I remember I went over there once against a guy named I think Yamamiya, and before that I was over there once, and I just went to the gym and they were there, and I was like, oh, here's somebody to roll with. So I went and started rolling with the guy. And I'm a new guy at this point, so I'm still trying to impress these guys. And he's like the Neo Blood tournament champion. And he has established name. So I started rolling with him, and I'm giving my A game. And I submitted him like 3 times. I remember thinking, dude, he's not that good. Well, come to realize all he was doing was, I wasn't even supposed to fight him. And all he was doing was learning my moves and learning what I was doing. So we fought like 6 months later. He knew everything I was going to do, and he'd already practiced. I'm like, they knew the game way more than I did. That was very smart of him, just to let me do whatever. I felt like a badass, and I felt like I was better than him, and he knew exactly what I was going to do. So they're very smart about manipulating. Like you said, Lucia, he manipulated you, and that's a game they play. They use more tactics than I ever thought that they were doing back then.
I don't get where this slapping stuff comes into play, and you can't hit the face. You got to punch to the body if you do throw anything on your feet. I don't get it.
Well, I mean, just so we can kind of let the people at home understand what took place, Yuki Kondo is the world champion for pancrase at that time. And they brought you in for a main event without a corner. So you come without a corner, Yuki Kondo's got the belt on, and Yuki doesn't take the belt off until he's in the ring, and they announce his full name. The audience stops clapping. Okay, now I take my belt off. So he starts with a head kick, which lands, and the pancrase rules, it requires that whenever a knockdown like that takes place, that there's like an 8 count that follows in order to allow your receiving fighter, to recover as well as continue the fight. And when Miguel and I were prepping for this interview, I said, I said to him, either he didn't recover from that opening kick because it was hard. And, you know, Yuki was wearing boots, I might add. Or he didn't know the rules until he got there. You know?
I didn't know the rules until I got there.
Okay, so that is true. Okay.
Yeah. And that's why Jason DeLucia takes me through this whole, you can't slap while the guy's down on the ground. It's disrespectful. They consider it a big, you know, deal if you do. And Jason Godsey didn't get that memo. Thank God.
I don't think Jason cared. Man.
I watched those fights. I'm like, I didn't know you could do that. I watched Godsey's fights, you know, a couple years later when he was fighting him going, I'm going to kill that DeLucia guy.
Yeah.
But, so why don't I go over there and fight for the world title right off the bat? I don't know jiu-jitsu.
What'd they pay?
I'm not a good stand-up fighter.
Well,
why did I get a warm-up fight? A couple warm-up fights.
You know what they love doing? They love bringing in big, strong American guys with names to try and beat. I mean, that made them look good. I mean, that's good for the fans, for the story. It made it look good. That's what it's about.
So what'd you get paid for that bout?
$12.50.
In which I had to give Phyllis 20%.
$1,250?
Yeah.
That's
For a
right.
world title fight.
Big money back in the day, Mike. Quit judging.
It was big money. I mean, remember I was fighting for $300.
Yeah.
And my bar tab was bigger than my fight purse.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. And, you know, another, you know, we briefly talked about it earlier. You know, your career has got just certain points in it that are incredibly fascinating for us historians. And you fought on the International Valley Judo Championships 5, and you fought against Wallid Ismail.
Yeah.
And dude, you know what was really cool watching that fight? Carlson Sr. was in Wallid's corner. It was good to see just a little bit of footage of Carlson doing what it is he loved doing. I have a ton of respect for that guy.
So you know what they did to me at that fight, right?
You know what? I don't, but I've got my notes. But why don't you start?
So I had to make weight twice. And if it hadn't been for Daryl Gowar, national Greco-Roman champion, I wouldn't have made it the second time. I flew to Brazil, and I was in good shape. I trained for that fight. You know, it's bare knuckles. It's right up my alley. But they ruined my legs before I even got in that cage. I mean, I was dead. I weighed I'd probably say I weighed 240 when I took the fight. I had to weigh 199.
Ooh.
So I fly with no water, fly 17 hours. I'm dehydrated as crap. I get there, I'm still over. I'm about 209. So I cut 10 pounds. I'm running all day. So their scales are jacked up. I had scales in the locker or in my room. It says about 198. I'd cut about 11 pounds. So I go down. I never saw Phyllis Ismail. Apparently he weighed in, then I weighed in. They called me. So I went back to my room after I made weight. They called me and said, hey, you got to come down and weigh in front of Phyllis Ismail. Now you got to understand, there's no food that you would eat back here. So I had quarter pounders of cheese, milk. I had bought a gallon of milk. I had already put on 11 pounds. I mean, just in that, it's an hour's time. So so I go back down. Daryl Gowar is like, hey, get in that sauna, puts a bike in there, and he works out with me. Now, he's already made weight. He's already had to do this during the day with me. He was ripped off of that show bigger than anybody. Anyways, it was everything I could do to get back down again. So 10 o'clock at night, I tell Battarelli, I'm ready to weigh in. I'm back down to weight. Literally, I go to weigh in, and I make weight. No Phyllis Ismail anywhere. And now, mind you, I flew there dehydrated, got there at 10 a.m., and I must have ran 5 or 6 hours. But I would be fine because 24 hours would go around, my legs would be fine.
Yeah.
But I had to come back at 7 o'clock and run till 10 o'clock in a sauna room with blankets over me to make weight again. And Phyllis doesn't even show up for the second weigh-in. Now, everybody saw me weigh in the first time. And that wasn't good enough. He had to be there. Then he doesn't show up for the second weigh-in. So it's all these little tricks you do. Everywhere you go, around the world, they have their own little way of putting it on you without you even knowing it, and they have no recourse to fight against it. So the time I walked out there, we fought 30 minutes, but man, my legs were dead. I mean, just fried.
Well, let's rewind a little bit. So Sergio Battarelli is the name you threw. He's sometimes loved and sometimes despised in regards to the people that have, had their experience with him.
Yeah.
Was Federico Lapenda there as well?
I don't know him.
Okay, so
I got a poster on my wall downstairs.
Sergio Battarelli, what was your experience with him as a promoter?
Okay, so I never had problems with Sergio. He just said, "You're not fighting if you don't make weight again." I went, "Oh my God, are you kidding me? I just been drinking gallons of milk." And
what were you getting paid for this?
$3,000. And I mean,
especially in Brazil, it's $3,000 in Brazil plus a flight.
Yeah. Oh, and not to mention the
extra money
activities you get to do while you're down there. So, anyways, I won't go into that, but I'm just saying it's a trip you don't want to miss. And the women down there are beautiful. And so, Brad, I had no problems with him. I just that little weigh-in problem, but he came to pay me the next day. So he just said, "Man, you're a great fighter." I mean, he was very complimentary. I had no problems with him. I mean, he brought me back to fight for the heavyweight title, but the problem was I hadn't trained in 4 months. I mean, literally not walked in the gym in 4 months, and I'd been partying.
Well, here, let's stay on Wallid. We're not through with this yet. So this is the interesting part. Wallid, for I think it's 20 or 30 minutes, in essence, pins Gary in the corner, like literally stands up, pins, like they're upright, and he's got him in the corner. And he's just, I'm not going to call it dirty boxing. I'm going to say it's like a ground and pound that's really slow, where you're just yelling at the referee, "Will you please just separate or stand them up?" And the entire time, Gary, I think you muted, but the entire time, Gary, every once in a while, will put his hands, like his arms on the ropes, or even just like resting his hand, and the referee is all over Gary. He can't touch the rope. You can't touch the ropes. Meanwhile, Wallid's pushing him in the corner and then digging his entire hand in the knee, like your knee pad, and yanking on Gary's knee pad in order to get a takedown. So you can pull on shorts and knee pads, but if you have palm down on top of a rope, wait a minute, you're breaking the rules here.
So he pounded on my leg. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
He pounded on my leg for that 30 minutes. Just kept hitting my leg. I had such a huge hematoma on my leg that next day. I couldn't hardly walk. But we stood in that corner, and I don't know why they didn't break it up to start. I mean, because
horrible. Who
comes to a fight and go, "Want to see these guys lean on each other for 30 minutes? Two in shape guys." But when he came out there, let me just tell you about Pele. Pele stops me in the hallway. Nobody knows this story. Pele stops, and I don't know. He doesn't know English. I don't know how to speak
Portuguese.
Yeah. He goes, "Look," and he goes, "You got a boxing." He was just trying to say that to me. Like, he didn't like Phyllis for some reason. Pele was telling me how to beat him. And that's the first time I went to somewhere, somebody told me how to beat somebody. It was from that country. And, but he'd come out there, because I talked to Phyllis later, Wallid, I don't know how you say his name. He shot on me. I thought, how dumb are you? He shot on me, and he didn't take me down. My feet went out of the ring. They have these little ropes, the string ropes. I ripped those apart, and so when we get back up at the end of the fight, he tells me, "Oh, they told me you're a great boxer." I was like, "Who told you that lie?" I suck at boxing.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting.
You know what? I could not get my legs moving. I mean, as a wrestler, if I'm in an over and under, I should be able to get out of that, right? That day, I was so tired. I just couldn't get my mind and my legs together. You're talking about, I've ran from 10 a.m. to 10 o'clock at night in a sauna with a blanket over me and riding the bike. That's what my day was like. And I couldn't believe that he didn't show up for the second weigh-in.
He probably never was going to begin with.
Yeah.
They probably just wanted, I guarantee it.
I weighed in with everybody in God watching, but because he wasn't at that weigh-in, I'm like, where was he? I didn't see him weigh in either. But I will tell you this, that, he's kind of a light guy. I felt like he juiced up to that weight because he did feel strong. Like I've wrestled a lot of guys juicing. And now I guess I should say I never should accuse anybody of that, but let me tell you something. That guy felt like there was something else going on with him, but it didn't bother me. I mean, he couldn't control me even with my legs fried.
Yeah.
But little things like that has always happened to me wherever I went, little crazy stuff. I once took a fight. I was in a hotel at a casino and had been partying nonstop. I didn't sleep 2 days before a fight. And went in a fight. I got hit in the back of the head that kind of dropped me. But I would do things like self-sabotage myself sometimes.
Well, let's talk about Carlos Barreto. So they bring you back.
Yeah.
They bring you back a little over a year later. You're in a few months, August 26, 1999, where they put you in a heavyweight title fight against Carlos Barreto. And, in order to properly understand this at home, Carlos Barreto at the time, he had wins over Bobby Hoffman. I mean, let's just go through who we speak. Bobby Hoffman, Paul Varlins, Brandon Lee Hinkle, Kevin Randleman, Dan Bobich, Trey Telligman, and Ben Rothwell. So Carlos Barreto, in all honesty, and this is not just going, hey, we got a guy in our program that fought him. At a certain point in his career, he was top 3 in the world. Now, he just lost a pride fight, at this point, and this is kind of his bounce back. But Carlos Barreto is an incredible athlete, very talented.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was, and I'm telling you, now that you tell me all that stuff, I should have canceled that damn fight. I should have said no. But I guarantee you, the first thing in my mind, and I can sit here and tell you, I knew I was going back to Brazil, and I had a puncher's chance. Because let me tell you, anything can happen in this fight game. You wouldn't believe some of the greatest guys that will crumble mentally. And, you would think you could never beat them. But something happens to them. It could have been their buddy going, hey, watch out for Lionel's armbar. Next thing you know, Lionel's choking you out. But it's just like, I always believed I could win no matter how bad in shape I was, no matter what I ever did. I always felt like I had a chance, and I did not know that he had that. I knew some of his wins, but I didn't pay attention, didn't care. I called Ryan Stout. He goes, well, what do you want to do for 10 days before you go to Brazil? I go, let's train. He goes, Gary, he goes, that's overrated. He goes, just keep doing what you're doing. You're not going to get in shape enough to, you're not going to do in 10 days what you should have done been for 4 months, right? So me and him just went to the bar, started drinking, and continued on. But we didn't train. He came to my house with this big intention of, what do we do? Then he finally looked at me and said, you've been drinking for 4 months? I go, yeah. He goes, let's just continue. So we went to the bar. We went to Club Mark down by Chris Lytle's old stomping grounds on Stop 11 and Madison Avenue.
So
was it John Wayne?
What's that?
John Wayne?
Was next. Yeah, it was across the street.
Okay.
I used to bounce at Club Mark.
So Barreto takes the same approach that Wallid had.
Yes.
Pins Gary in the corner and just pounds on his legs.
Yeah. But I don't know if you guys saw this, but we went to knee each other and he broke my leg.
Oh, really?
And Miguel was saying it was my foot. No, it was my shin. He broke my shin. And I hobbled around. I wasn't going to the hospital there. There's no way. After I saw one of their hospitals, there's no way I was walking in there. Probably I get a dirty knife, or the guy goes, just let me give you a shot for the pain. I go, no, you're not sticking anything in me. And I had a broken leg. I flew back to America with my leg about that big.
Nice.
And I could barely walk, had no crutches, and I had a broken shin. So they went in and operated when I got back and fixed it. So I got a big scar on my knee right where they went in and put a bolt in there and stuff. And I went out partying that night with a broken leg. Hey, remember, I've been drinking since the 3rd grade. You don't know that about me.
So Gary's listed as 200 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. And Barreto, huh?
I'll take it. Is that my record?
Yeah, it's your record for them.
I don't want to be the most decorated fighter on this podcast.
By far.
Gary, but that was part of the show back then. You know,
yeah.
You know,
they had me at 200 wins and 2 losses.
Yeah.
Holy crap!
Oh, you were good, dude.
Hey, ever since I figure my record was like 69, 10, and 1.
Okay.
And I had about 50 fights in that bar before we got a hold of Phyllis. I'd go there every weekend and fight. And I wish I knew the name of it. It was downtown Indy, and I cannot remember the name of that place. But it had a strip club and just another little bar on the other side. But my first experience fighting was state police escort me out of the damn place. And they go,
so Gary, did you ever get ripped off by a promoter?
No, and I'll tell you, I thought the first one would be Jamie Levine from WEF.
From WEF, yeah.
I thought he paid me. He gave me an option, or Monte did. $2,500 to show against Rich Franklin, who I had no idea who he was, and $5,000 to win. Or I take $5,000 straight fee. I'm thinking, I'll take that's pretty good money. So, I mean, for a fighter, like, you know, back in the day, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I took that fight, but I had a good training camp. I know I had plenty of time to know, 3 months ahead of time. So I worked hard. And which is a story I've never told. My buddies know that trained me, but 30 days before that fight, I tore my groin muscle. I mean, like bad. I was running sprints at Muncie Central. When Todd Moore were running, boom, I just felt something pop. It's a month before this fight. And I'd already had a great 2 months of training. Been working my hands. I mean, everything was coming together. And tore my groin muscle. And I took the fight anyway because of the money. Like, you don't turn down $5,000. I mean, even though I was making 6 figures, I was like, first of all, you don't turn down fights, and you don't turn down $5,000 back then for an Indiana fight. Not on pay-per-view. And but I couldn't shoot at all. And so we switched our game plan to just boxing, because I could not shoot anymore. I was done. So I couldn't shoot on a guy. So I had a feeling once we got against the cage and stuff, it was going to be a long night. If you look at me going into the third period, I was stretching out my leg. I could not get that. It hurt so bad. I asked them for a shot before, but they didn't have any. This guy said, well, I got some. That needle's about that long. I was like, that's all right. But if you look at the third period, I almost didn't come out for the last period. My groin hurt so bad, and I was stretching it. And I almost didn't come out. I took a lot of time. I thought they were going to tell me I was over. But I turned around, went back out there, and that's when he kicked me in the head. But the thing that always pissed me off this day, I knew I wasn't winning that fight. But they had a thing with WF. They had a standing 8 count. That when he hit me, he did a break-no stun. He caught me like right here, not here, up in the head. He just caught me as a break-no stun. I kind of went down. I mean, you guys know what a break-no stun is. You just kind of, your body involuntarily goes down, but you can get right back up. So I did. And I go, where's my 8 count? And it's over. I'm like, are you kidding me? But I mean, like, nobody follows the rules anymore.
Yeah.
They make the rules, they don't want to follow them. So I always pay attention at the rules meeting, and I've never been able to protest them when they've.
So an interesting caveat to that card is
that was a loaded card.
It's a sick card. Dave Monet fought Pele Landis Jones.
Yeah.
On that card. Were you in the hotel? We had Alex Davis on, I don't know, about 6-7 months ago, where he told us kind of a famous story involving Pele in regards to the hotel room.
Yeah.
And, essentially getting robbed by a local woman from Evansville, running out of the hotel room naked, in essence, doing a flying knee and breaking the windshield of a taxi cab in order to get his money back. Were you there at any point in time when that was going on?
Okay, so I was at the hotel, and my buddy said something was going on outside, but I was hammered. And I said, it was after the fight. And I go, I'm not going out there. I'll get thrown in jail for something stupid. I said, I'm staying in my room. All my buddies went out, but I just continued to drink beer. So I wasn't privy to any of that stuff. I knew something was going on, but I wouldn't leave my room. And another reason I didn't want to leave my room, I was pretty, beside myself for losing that fight. And not that I ever thought I was going to win or whatever. I was just frustrated, me being hurt and couldn't perform the way I should have. I never turned down a fight ever, man. That was the bad part about me. I would never assess my situation and go, look, don't take this fight. But here's the problem when I was fighting. You never knew when opportunities were coming. Jason Godsey used to get my case all the time and say, you got to stay prepared, stay ready. I'm like, man, I got to live life. I mean, I don't know when these opportunities are coming, and I'm not going to stop living. And that.
Okay, Gary, here's another thing, man. It's like I feel like people like you may have like, I don't know if it's a sickness or what it is, but I can't turn down fights either. I feel like if you think you're the baddest dude around on the planet, you can beat anybody at any time. How can you turn it down? If I say no, then all of a sudden that's doubt creeping into me. And how do you fight if you don't think you're going to win? You know, if you don't think you're the best guy ever, how can you take any fight? So I couldn't turn down a fight either. No matter what, I always had to do it. And I think you have the same thing as me. You can't turn down a fight. Then you're afraid. You know, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, and you don't know when your next opportunity is coming. Yeah. I wait another year not to fight. I mean, you just don't know what. You don't know when those opportunities come, and you don't know which one, to be quite frank, puts you on the map, right?
Yeah.
Puts you on the projection. You know, Perretti would never put me in the UFC. You know, and listen, the UFC was right up my alley at that time. But because of me, got into it in the dressing room over my shoes, he never forgave me for that. And he was the matchmaker of the UFC. He wouldn't put me in. And I'll tell you something. I went to fight Tommy Glanville in Extreme Fighting 4, and we got into it there. I'm like, why am I fighting Tommy Glanville again? I had gotten in shape. And he goes, this is going to be your opponent. They never told me who my opponent was until the day I walked up, the night of the fight.
Wow.
We're fighting Tommy Glanville. I was so pissed off. Glanville was pissed too. We're like, we just fought each other.
Yeah.
And I paid $12.50 for that fight. And so we got in the ring. He made a mistake. I took him down with a little ground and pound. But you realize we could hear Perretti talking, and he was talking trash about us while we were fighting. We just shut down. We both didn't throw another punch. We just kind of batted around. I never even tried another takedown. And I was in shape to get those. I'd had it with him.
So what was was it the gym shoe incident?
The wrestling shoes. Remember, I get ready to go out. He goes, you can't wear those. I go, I go, yeah, I am, or I'm not fighting.
All right. So on the WEF card where he fought Rich Franklin, Conan Silveira headlined against Dan Severn. Did you talk to Conan prior to the bout? Did you guys ever communicate after that?
I saw him. I've never spoken to him. But I took a picture with him after our fight at the after-fight party. I never spoke to him again until Conor McGregor was at UFC, and I was at that fight. And he can speak English now, whatever, but we've never talked about that fight. We've always said hi or whatever, took a picture and went on, but we've never discussed that. I should have been a world champion that night, period.
Yeah. I thought that was taken from you. I mean, and let
me ask you about the other end of that book. How about Severn? He's a wrestler, more or less from your end and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts on him? And like, some of his fights are questionable sometimes. You know what I mean?
He's had a bunch of fake fights.
You know, I kind of honestly know about all this stuff, everything. I think some of these guys get in there and do not want to risk their reputations for a small show. I remember they used to pay Dan like $3,000 every fight. To me, I thought that's a lot of money. And this is back early. But he would use that, but he'd fight damn near every weekend for that kind of money. You can make a living that way, I guess. Yeah. But I think a lot of these fighters with names, they put them on the card, but they did not want to put them against anybody that can beat them. They wanted to keep that hype up there, put people in the seats. And the fighter did not want to risk losing his reputation. And as you know, Dan had a reputation. So he didn't, I don't think, I mean, he's certainly a very decorated wrestler in America. And he's earned all his accolades. Very good wrestler out of Arizona. Him and his brothers, great wrestlers. But I think as you get into the game, and I don't mention any particular fights. I think a lot of people put certain people on cards and sell tickets, but the one thing the fighter will say is, hey, don't put me in jeopardy. I'm going to do this for you at a lower fee. So I'm, basically give me a tomato can or let's work this fight out. I think that's, in all honesty, that's my opinion.
Okay.
I don't think they want to risk reputations on trying to, and it costs too much.
Well, Gary, I mean, you're essentially saying is that there was a bit of showmanship in regards to Dan Severn at certain aspects or points in his career, which is something that we've ran into a few times, on this podcast.
Right.
Yeah. And, I get it. You guys got to make a living.
But it's harder to pay two tough guys to fight at a small show.
For $3,000.
He came to Muncie. Sure. He came to Muncie and he fought a guy that's dead now. It's passed away. But the guy had no business in that cage. No business. And it's harder to fight and I think they paid him $500. I picked him up at the airport. He stayed all night with me. And we partied. Oh, dude, we partied the night before that fight. And so Dan fought him. He's just a big kickboxer, overweight shit. Dan took him down, but he had no business fighting that guy. But you cannot bring two superstars to Muncie, Indiana and afford to pay them. It just doesn't work out.
No, not possible.
I mean, you can't have two guys fighting each other in the main event, if they're already really well known. There's sometimes you put a main event together, you have no idea how this fight's going to turn and becomes the greatest fight of the night. I've seen some in Indiana where they've matched some people up, paid them crap, and next thing you know, you got one of the best fights you've ever seen.
Right, for sure.
You can't bring superstars in local shows and stuff and pay both fighters. You can pay one. You can afford to get away paying like damn, but you can't pay the other guy.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So, Chris, how do you and Gary know each other?
Like I said, when I first started training, Gary was kind of a well-known commodity then, and we would just every now and again we'd just be at the gym at the same time. Gary would be training different places. Sometimes he'd swing into where we were training, and we'd get to work out a little bit. And it was always just a cool event. Like I said, I'll be honest with you, most of the time it was, Gary would be like, "Let's do some takedowns." I'd be like, "Damn, I was never going to take him down." It was impossible. So,
who was your buddy that fought in the UFC? Was it Dan O'Brien or Dan O'Neill?
Josh O'Brien.
Okay. So he always he wrestled in college and he's God dang it, dude, I can't take you down.
Yeah, he wrestled for Purdue. He's a good, but there was no taking Gary down. It was
Jake O'Brien.
Jake O'Brien. Yeah.
Three-time high school state champ.
Yeah. So it's like, this is a moot point while we're doing this, but that was always fun. But anyway, it was kind of cool. Him and Jason were like the two big guys from Indiana. So it was always cool when they'd come in there and get to work out with them a little bit.
That's good.
Yeah, but like I said, I saw, I met you first at Southport High School.
Yeah.
I rolled with you, but I knew then and there, I said, this guy's going to be good.
That's
and
cool.
I just knew. You didn't even know. You hadn't been training very long. It might have been your first practice. Who knows? But I know when people are going to be great fighters. I said, this guy's going to be good.
Cool.
You certainly have been the best fighter in Indiana. I mean, you've certainly represented Indiana with a lot of pride, endurance, grit. You've certainly played that role of representing us better than I ever could because I started in a different era.
Yeah.
But you were the perfect
Well, I was
person
fortunate. I got to, had the benefit of you and Jason kind of already blazing the path for us. We actually had a place to train and this was that. Like you and Jason, I always hearing stories about Jason, like, I had to go, sleep in the garage as a place just to learn a seminar so I could learn to move. Just didn't know what to, he's trying to learn, you're trying to learn. But by the time I got there, you guys already learned that for us. So it really helped, I was the second generation, not the first.
So Jason Godsey and Jeremy Horn, these two guys were nuts in the beginning. I mean, nuts. We were at an after-fight party, and Jeremy Horn and Jason are talking about submissions and everything. And I kid you not, there's a room open next to the bar. It was dark. These two guys go in there and start doing jiu-jitsu for like 2 or 3 hours. And they didn't drink, either one of them, and they're training. And I was standing out there in the hall looking at it going, oh, my God, look at these guys. And but they trained the whole time we were in that bar, learning, passing back and forth ideas. But Godsey did that all the time. And he's probably just one of the better heavyweights for jiu-jitsu I'd ever saw. He just, he was good. He was good at jiu-jitsu for a heavy guy. Very good. But they guys would do that all the time. Everywhere we went, they'd find a spot, even if it's carpet, man. We were going to be in Newcastle. And we were at a restaurant, like carpet in. Jason starts training with this other guy I don't know. And I'm just like, they're on the carpet in the restaurant.
Yeah.
But that's about how he was. He always wanted to stay in shape and then wait for the opportunities. I was like, I want the opportunity first, then I'll train. Because you guys got to understand, the best 10 years of my life were gone. From 20 to 30. I didn't get on pay-per-view until I was 31. So the best in shape I have ever been was gone. I mean, I wrestled Russia in 1990 and won my dual meet there. And I was wrestling 198 pounds. But I was in great shape. But those years were gone. And Battlecade's 5 years later. So I think after I wrestled Russia, I just kind of, I did in 94 I was All-American. I cut down to 177, but I didn't train much after that. After I became All-American, it kind of healed a lot of wounds with me. And I don't think I ever trained the same ever since.
Excellent.
But I just wanted to get out there and fight. Like, not this stuff you're seeing today.
Yeah, just fight.
I just wanted to fight. Bare knuckles, no rules.
You know, Gary, that's part of it right now. I think one thing that has been lost with the skill set being better, it's an athletic contest. It's not a fight anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People, it's like, I can out jab you, I can hold you down, it's an athletic contest, and it's lost something. That's what I like, the bare knuckle fights that I go to and commentate. That's still a fist fight. If you haven't watched those, you got to start watching those, because BKFC, oh man, those things are awesome, because it's still a fight. And in 10 years, it probably won't be. It'll be all technical and nobody will care anymore. But I mean, I love it when you find a sport where people just come to fight. That was there when you were there. And when that era went away, you kind of like, I don't like it anymore. You know what I mean?
There's no way I would do bare knuckle fighting. You know what? Those guys wrap their hands still. It's like a cast, right?
No, you wrap your hands, but you can't wrap the knuckle. So it's like, yeah, you go like an inch below the knuckle. Just gauze, yeah, and tape, but it's got to be an inch below the knuckle. But I mean, the knuckle has to be bare, but the hand, protect the bones in the hand, but not the knuckle.
So I do want to mention something along that fighting. Pat Miletich, because I was there early, he was the first guy I think that ever was convinced that you had to learn everything. And he went about getting that done. And I think that's what made that camp so much better right off the bat.
They were the best in the world for a while, for a long time.
He went out to California one time because he called me and he says, man, these guys, all they want to do is jiu-jitsu. He was out there with some Brazilians. And but he didn't buy that nonsense. He wanted to be a boxer, a Muay Thai guy, wanted to be great at jiu-jitsu. He's the first guy in my mind was sold on the idea of cross training. And that's what made that team so good, I think. They realized that early and worked it into perfection.
Absolutely.
When you come to my camp, we never, that wasn't, I'm running up downstairs, doing takedowns, and maybe trying to get caught in a submission kind of later, but we never converted to all that. I always wore shoes, so I couldn't kick, but I didn't learn to become a great boxer, man. You got to learn some of that stuff young. A good boxer learns that stuff young, like wrestling.
I felt like that was one area that really helped me out when I started. I was working out with you guys doing mainly a lot of ground stuff, but eventually I started going in and doing boxing, and I became a professional boxer, and that's really when my career took off. When I developed more than one style, and it was kind of accidental that it happened. I started becoming a professional boxer, and I was like, hey, this works in MMA too, So once I tied both things together, that's when my career kind of took off.
I think now you probably better start fight one of these YouTubers so you make some money.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm in. Bring it, nerds.
What's that guy's name? John Paul or something? Jake Paul? What's his name?
Yeah. Hey, I've already put some out there. Do bare knuckle, I'll do it. No response. So.
No response.
Well, hey man, Gary, I want to thank you for not only sharing your time with us, but man, just like I said, you helped lay the foundation for what led to me becoming the second generation of fighters from Indiana. So if you hadn't been there, maybe I'd have never been here. So thank you for that. And just a hell of a fun guy to be around, and what you're doing now, just giving back to everybody. And I feel like this, man, I've developed a skill set over the last 30 something years of wrestling and fighting. Like, what do I do with it now unless I give it to somebody else? So passing that along is so important and so valuable. And thank you for doing that shit, man.
Yeah, I think my last fight was at 46 years old. So I started fighting at 30 and finished at 46, 16-year career. I didn't know what I was going to do after that because all I known was competing.
Yeah.
And thank God I saw these little kids wrestling at one of my buddy's house. He had a mat in there and we're wrestling. I go, man, you guys would be great if you had a coach because their coach had quit. And they go, and so I'm rolling with them, you know, doing my thing. I'm like, you guys are pretty good. So I get a call a month later from Hamilton Heights saying, hey, we want you to come in and interview to be a coach. So I went in there, they turned me down. With all the accolades I had in wrestling, they turned me down. So a month later, one of the assistant coaches called me and says, dude, did you get that job? I go, no, they didn't want me. I get a call a little later. He must have went off on him. But the reason I go back is wrestling has saved my life 100 times over. I thought I'd be dead the time I was 25. But every time I've not felt good in life, I've walked into a wrestling room and I feel like it has healed my soul. And to be coaching again and be coaching kids in my 10th year, and we've been very successful. Like I said, we're undefeated this year. We're going to the team state championships next year. Has been very healing for me, and it's kept me balanced. So I tell people, if you were ever an athlete in any sport, go back to it. If you ever feel out of center, it will bring you back and it will help you.
Well, just one more note on that, man. Just to Gary's point, I'm from Indiana, and I I coached for wrestling for a while. Hamilton Heights was a joke. It was never even thought of it. Nobody even knew who they were for wrestling or anything. And that now they're doing so good. It's really amazing to see. It always takes something like that. They didn't have a wrestling background, but they have it now. So that's a good job for Gary.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. We appreciate your time, Gary.
Hey, listen, if we were on different grounds, I'd tell you a lot of different stories. But I just know that, maybe some of that stuff left for when I'm out of coaching and out of being president of a company. And
hey, to be continued.
Yeah, but Chris, all it means is we got to get him fired. And then we got to get him back on here.
Hey, I'm not proud of all that stuff, but I can tell you this. I will not go to my grave and not say I've not lived life to the fullest. I will have no regrets.
There we go.
I've challenged myself in every avenue of my life. I mean, you would believe, I've wrestled a 7'4", 886-pound bear. I trained out for the American Gladiators, 8,000 participants. I got down to the final 8. I mean, I've done everything that I could be challenged on. I've done. I've jumped off 60-foot cliffs, and I had to balance myself so I wouldn't hit either rock on each side. I had to go right down the middle. I mean, I've challenged myself adrenaline-wise my whole life.
That's good. Well, thanks for joining us, man. I appreciate it.
All right, guys.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.